red, yellow, and blue. What is that? Those are the three primary colors. And they're seemingly endless colors, but they all are mixtures of red, yellow, and blue. Now, there's seemingly endless beliefs, religions, governments, cultures, but they all come from just two modes of thinking. Truth handed down from above, top-down authority, or truth generated from within, integrating reality. So you have the following mind and the integrating mind. And all of you neo-thinkers know from all the writings that I always talk about the following mode and the integrating mode. Well, everything on planet Earth, every religion, every government, every culture, every belief system, all of it is a mixture of those two, of just those two modes of thinking. Now, those two modes of thinking were created 2,400 years ago. Plato brought us hierarchy, that's truth handed down from above. And Aristotle brought us neothink, which is truth integrated from within. Like the endless hues of colors, we get endless so-called hues of beliefs and religions and governments and cultures from the mixture of those two primary operating systems of thinking. Now, I don't think that's ever been identified before. The great tragedy of humanity, as you know, is that we lost most of Aristotle. We probably lost about 80% when all is said and done. And we lost the best of Aristotle. We lost the operating system, basically, of neothink. And we got zero Aristotle for centuries because his corpus was buried for about 200 years. So everything good in history has come from Aristotle's integrating mind. Everything. Pax Romana, which was the greatest, was like a proto-prime law society. The first 200 years, approximately, of Rome, Pax Romana. You had the golden age of Islam. You had the Renaissance, you have the Enlightenment, and you have America. Those are all because of a little bit of Aristotle came back to civilization. That's everything good of humanity's history came from Aristotle. From the little bit of Aristotle we've got. Now, conversely, everything bad in history came from Plato's following mind. The Dark Ages, Stalin's Soviet Union, Hitler's Germany, Mao's China. Now, I've identified that the great evil is the hierarchy. It's the hierarchy because it's full of and it's contained by initiatory force. That's the only way you can sustain top-down authority is through initiatory force. And of course, that explains the prime law that no civilization has ever experienced. Removing initiatory force ends the hierarchy. The prime law ends the hierarchy. And Neovia will be the first civilization on Earth to ever exist without a hierarchy. Now, as you move toward either side of the spectrum, the power multiplies synergistically. The more you move toward hierarchical thinking, the greater that deadly power becomes, say like Hitler's Germany. And the more you move toward volition, toward the elimination of the hierarchy, well, that will be Neovia. And I guess America was early America was the closest we came. But it's, as I said, the further you go, the more synergistic power compounds. So the beginning of America, the first 150 years, is really nothing compared to as you get closer and closer to a purely volitional society. So let's think about that. One is deadly power that kills, and the other is power that gives life. One removes hundreds of millions of lives over time, and one cures diseases, chronic diseases, age-related diseases, and saves hundreds of millions of lives over time. Now that's at the civilizational level. The death mode of thinking and the life mode of thinking. Two modes. Everything we have on planet Earth for all our history is a mixture, is a hue of those two modes of thinking. The beauty by breaking it down through the unified field and identifying that there are two modes of thinking and only two modes of thinking, it allows us to hone in on the thinking for life. So I want to bring this down from the civilizational level down to your level, to the individual level. Today, there is only one way to get to your dreams, to what I'm calling more and more, using this term more and more, eudaimonia. That was Aristotle's word for our concept for basically, we don't have a good translation today, but I do believe I have the translation. And eudaimonia is supposed to mean happiness, but it's much deeper than happiness. In the end, Aristotle meant human flourishing, which brings in everything. It brings in wealth. It brings in love, relationships, family dynamics, romantic dynamics, well-being, self-esteem, creating for what is greatest to your life, human flourishing. I'll give you an example in a moment, how I turned down well over $1 billion for eudaimonia. We'll get to that later. So when I talk to you about wealth or your dreams or happiness or a happy life or romantic love or moving beyond survival pressures, I'm talking about eudaimonia. And now here's my translation. I know what Aristotle, what he truly meant by eudaimonia. In fact, I'd say I might be closer to Aristotle than any other human being. I have spent all my life studying and creating this new way of thinking, neothink, and more recently developed the unified field of conscious civilization, which made me realize I'm recovering Aristotle, is what I've done all my life, is recovered Aristotle's operating system of thinking. So I just wanted to tell you, as I talk to you and I talk about wealthy life, look, I really don't just mean money. As I said, I've turned down more money than I've ever made, and you'll see why later, for eudaimonia. When I say wealthy, I mean eudaimonia. I mean flourishing. And here's the translation, the accurate translation of eudaimonia. Human flourishing, what Aristotle really meant by that was aligning with your essence as a human being. They were so fresh off the breakdown of the bicameral mind that he didn't have all the vocabulary to say what I'm about to say. Eudaimonia is aligning with your essence as a human being. And your essence as a human being is value creation, is adding to existence, is bringing values to the world, to civilization, to humanity. It's so much greater than selfishness of making a fast buck, making a lot of money. It's so much greater than that. It's so much greater than I'm happy because now I'm wealthy. So much greater than that. It's aligning with your essence as a human being, wherever that takes you. And that takes you to value creation. And value creation is giving back, but not in a selfless way. It appears selfless. It's the most selfless thing you can do, but it's also selfish because you're doing it for the experience, what it brings to you, the flourishing that you experience by creating and putting these values out there into humanity for your fellow man. So I just wanted to lay that all out for you, that as you hear me talk about wealth or riches, I'm speaking eudaimonia, not my bank account. Bank account is all part of it. It's all part of it. But it's so much more than that. And that's what Aristotle's concept was. It's so much more than just happiness, or just so much more than wealth. Okay? So, to get to your dreams, to eudaimonia, to a wealthy and happy and romantic life beyond the survival pressure trap. You know, I've been talking about that with you, the survival pressures trap. All right, to get beyond that, to get to your dreams, we must go to the point of human singularity. And what I mean by that is what it is that makes us capable of becoming wealthy, of becoming rich, of eudaimonia, of leaving behind survival pressures. And what is that human singularity? What enables that? The human mind. You see, no other animal can get rich, only humans. Now, realize I'm using rich in its richest form here, okay? But just using the word rich makes it very understandable. So no other animal can get rich. Only humans because of their minds, right? Only humans. Now let me ask, what is the single common denominator of every self-made rich person? The single common denominator. Think of Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos, or the late great Steve Jobs. What do they have in common? Well, they are all incredibly creative, right? They're all incredibly creative. Now, as my writings have taught you, the birth of the creative mind happened 2,400 years ago in ancient Greece. One man discovered the operating system for creative thinking. And guess who that was? That man was Aristotle. However, his most influential works to creative thinking were lost after his death. So the world struggled without creativity until the Renaissance, when some of Aristotle's works were rediscovered and entered the Western world. And by the way, I am speaking Western world here because the golden age of Islam had rediscovered prior to the Western world. But not in the Western world, not until the Renaissance, when a little bit of Aristotle was rediscovered, the creativity, that creative thinking, entered back into humanity, pulling us out of that long darkness where knowledge didn't advance. So where did that come from? Did that come from Plato's hierarchy, the Renaissance? No, it's the rediscovery of a little bit of Aristotle. Now, the much more prevalent, I'll call it the old way of thinking, that the hierarchical format still dominates most people even today, unfortunately. And that's why most people are not wealthy, why they're just scraping by under survival pressures. The few who discover Aristotle's thinking, which is neo-thinking, are the only ones who actually set off those creative sparks that lead to a fulfilling, wealthy, flourishing life in Eudaimonia. um, and there's truly no other way to leave behind those survival pressures to eudaimonia than Aristotelian thinking, neo-thinking. Now, I said I can prove it, that there is only one path to getting past survival pressures to living your dreams. So here I go. First, notice how few people ever get to enjoy their dreams in their youth, growing up, of whatever that might have been. And of course, wealth and luxury and the good life, eudaimonia, a great family life and romantic relationship. How many people really get all that in life? Really not many. Well, the reason, and my proof here reaches back those 2,400 years to Athens, Greece, specifically to three men you read about in your recent exposure to my latest book, Unleashed. And those of you who don't have Unleashed, you go on my X account at Real Mark Hamilton. I am putting up 128 articles. I'm putting up 28 articles that gives you a feel for the unified field of conscious civilization. But you'll read about in there, and those of you reading Unleashed, which I think most of you are, you'll recall these specific three men: Plato, Aristotle, and Alexander the Great. Now, they formed and demonstrated how we think even to this day. Now, the proof is in the mathematical results. So let's take a look. Let's observe history to find out who will live their dreams today and who will not. Plato taught us hierarchical thinking used by nearly the entire Western world. Now, Aristotle taught us a different type of internal thinking and was hired by King Philip II of Macedonia to teach it to his adolescent son, Alexander. At 20 years old, Alexander left Macedonia with his army and with Aristotle's unique mode of thinking. Historians are in awe and disbelief of Alexander the Great's accomplishments. He never lost a battle in 10 years of conquering the Western world that was dominated with Plato's mode of thinking. He would defeat armies much larger than his own, some up to 10 times the size of his own army. So through Alexander and his success, the world witnessed the explosive superiority of Aristotelian thinking when confronting Platonic thinking. You see, the Western world was on that hierarchical structure and of thinking, and Alexander had the other mode of thinking, the integrated thinking, neo-thinking, taught to him by Aristotle, and wiped out armies 10 times his size. So Aristotle is undefeated against Plato. Tragically, Aristotle's writings mostly vanished in antiquity. Today, the lucky few who access Aristotle's thinking, that's creative neo-thinking, achieve their dreams. They are much more successful than those who are stuck in this hierarchical structure at work. The majority who still use Plato's hierarchy stuck thinking never have, really don't ever have a true shot at becoming wealthy or aligning with their essence as human beings. Value creation. They're stuck in that division of labor format, that hierarchical structure at work. So they tend to drown in stagnation. Of course, we at the Neo-Think Society clearly know the difference between the two ways of thinking, and we continually show this to you. Aristotle's unique way of thinking 2,400 years ago is neo-thinking today that I spent my life uncovering in my neo-think corpus. You are very lucky to be in the neo-think society because now, not only is this your path to the life of your dreams, but this is your moment. This is your moment with everything that's happening here with Neovia. This is the only path, and you're here with us. So realize that everything in civilization is structured by hierarchy for thousands of years. Governments, religions, businesses, it's all top-down authority. Everywhere you turn, all around you, it's just the old way of thinking. And that stumps your creative power, your potential. Hierarchy smothers our lives in those routine ruts and stagnant, go-nowhere tasks. You do your routine tasks that you're handed from above, and then we rot in stagnation. That's the way it's been. But the self-made rich folks, rich in the biggest sense, discovered something else besides these top-down hierarchical structures. They discovered how to circumvent hierarchy to build their wealth and pursue their dreams. The secret of all self-made rich folks is 3 words: circumvent the hierarchy. Now, I made it my life's mission to circumvent the hierarchy on many levels. Now, I want to tell you, here's how you'll know someone will someday grow rich. Sorry. There we go. That could be your spouse, your adult children. It could be your fiance. It could be yourself. But here's a formula how you can know if someone will someday grow rich in the biggest sense of the word. Again, let's get rooted. Let's go back 2,400 years to those 2 distinct forms of thinking that grew out of antiquity. One was contained and controlled by hierarchy, invented by Plato. The other was creative and controlled by self, invented by Aristotle. The struggling working class today, following their routine task at work, are caught in Plato's stagnant hierarchy and will never grow rich. On the other hand, the very same struggling individuals who are, say, at a job or in a company, at work, who are persistently improving tasks, not just doing them, but improving them, and improving routines at work. Well, they're creating better ways of doing things. They're embracing Aristotle's exhilarating creative thinking. And this is what my business books are teaching you: how to improve your routine at work, how to find purpose, how to improve those tasks, not just do them. And often those people will grow rich. It's as simple as arithmetic. And I can spot future millionaires by this simple measurement. I really can. Now, am I oversimplifying this? No, absolutely not. The self-made rich elite class, the Elons, the Bezos, the Ellisons, well, they're all thriving in Aristotle's creative thinking method. That's neo-thinking. They're soaring in value creation, in line with their essence, Eudaimonia. They're soaking up their dreams. I mean, just look at Elon. Okay, so Elon with his SpaceX, he's manifesting his childhood dreams, isn't he? Those of you who know about Elon's childhood. And he's about to have the largest IPO ever on our planet, 3 times over. Not only is he the richest person on the planet, but he's going to become the first trillionaire who ever lived. Now, I'm not saying that, and Wallace has talked to you about this in the past, I'm not saying that you should go out and live like Elon. I personally wouldn't want that life per se, but that's what works for him. And he is living his dreams. He is living in his world in Eudaimonia. Now, do you see the connection between neo-think, dreams, and wealth? So it's time for us to keep going deeper into this neo-think, because this is the key. Neo-think. This is Aristotle resurrected. The suffering people of the world, well, they're still stuck and sinking in Plato's thinking method, smothered by the hierarchy above them. So if you're sizing up potential in someone, again, like a boyfriend or your young adult sons and daughters or your spouse, well, look for that Aristotelian way of thinking, neo-thinking, creating better ways of doing things. Be something very small, but if you see someone who is just at work, remember Charles Nash? You probably remember the story of him. Wherever they put him, they'd come in the next day and his station looked completely different than others because he was making it better. He was being creative with it. He put a treadle and so both hands were free so he could move the materials through much quicker than everyone else who had to do everything by hand. He was just naturally neo-thinking. He had that creative Aristotelian thinking. He was making every place they moved him better. You spot someone like that in any business, and they're going to be wealthy in every sense of the word someday. Do you remember my story as a 15-year-old dishwasher and figuring out how to save that restaurant? And today, 52 years later, it's thriving because of my original integration. So that's why I'm very successful today. Could have looked at that 15-year-old boy, dishwasher, sometimes a busboy, in this little mom and pop restaurant, but look where he is today because he wanted to improve existence around him. So I can walk into any business and observe them for a day or two, and I can say, that guy there or that gal there, they're going to be extremely successful someday because they are making the task better. They're improving on it. They're getting a little bit creative. That's Aristotelian thinking. And when you have that, goodbye survival pressures. Hello, beautiful, transcendent pressures. Hello, eudaimonia. Now, I'm going to wrap this up by telling you a story of how neotech and neothink grew to the world influence we have today. Well, my father was an extremely successful scientist for DuPont. His name on 5 major patents. He was also a very, very good poker player. And he wrote a poker book that was published in 1968 The title of that poker book was Poker, a Guaranteed Income for Life by Using the Advanced Concepts of Poker. And it became the world's best-selling poker book at the time. And it was published by a huge publishing company, Warner Brothers. And the hardcover was by Crown Publishers. And it was an extremely successful, very profitable for Warner and Crown. Well, when my father wrote that, his DTC method in poker that creates the good player, the discipline, thought, and then control method. Well, he realized that that DTC method applies beyond the poker tables in the real world. So he buckled down and wrote an incredible manuscript titled The Neotech Discovery. He took the DTC method out of the poker tables, beyond the card tables, brought it into the real world with the advantages, the Neotech advantages, the 114 Neotech advantages. So my father and I was a young man at the time, we thought that Neotech was going to be a world bestseller. I had fantasies of it selling more copies than the Bible eventually, because I knew the value in it and how it lifted every soul alive. So we thought it was going to be just an incredible blockbuster seller. So he brought it to Warner Brothers. They were very anxious to get this. He had told them about it. And lo and behold, dead silence. Then rejection. And we talked about it. We said, how is that even possible? This could sell thousands of times more than that extremely profitable poker book. Well, I would have nothing of it. So I worked at a bank at the time. And I started writing down the values of the Neotech Discovery because it had such an impact on me. And I wrote, originally thinking I was going to send this to those idiots at Warner Brothers to enlighten them to what they just turned down. But as I wrote and called my father with the old landlines, heavy landlines, and say, he'd pick up the phone and I say, breakthrough, and we'd be on the phone for hours on end. That went on for days, then weeks, then months. Because I realized to really capture the value of the Neotech Discovery, we didn't even know yet the value. And it was in the process of trying to explain it on paper that made us realize and get deeper and deeper and deeper into what it really was. So a point came when I realized I'm not sending this letter to the executives at Warner Brothers. This letter has to go straight to the salt of the earth people that the Neotech Discovery was written for. So this is when I began learning, and my father and I began discovering what direct mail was. And this was the opportunity to send a letter directly to the people. And without realizing what I was doing, what we were doing, remember those three words I said earlier? The great power in life of all those self-made, successful people? Circumvent the hierarchy. We were circumventing the hierarchy, the publishing, the all-powerful publishing hierarchy we were circumventing that. That original sales letter, it became a sales letter in technical terms, but that's not really what I had set out to do, what we had planned on. We just were showing the great value of neotech to the people, to humanity. Well, we learned that that's called a sales letter if you send it through the mail to somebody. So our sales letter became perhaps one of, if not the most successful sales letter ever written in direct mail. And it's because the irony is that it's because we were not writing a sales letter. We were not selling through exaggeratory terms the neotech discovery. We were selling what we could get closer and closer to presenting the value it was to the salt of the earth people. So it was one of, and probably the most successful, sold over $100 million of the neotech discovery. Then in the process, I realized, without understanding hierarchy yet and circumventing hierarchy, without understanding Aristotle beyond philosophy or Plato beyond philosophy at the time, we were, well, discovering a new way of using our minds. Because instead of following what the hierarchy told us, which we did with the poker book, they said, we'll give you, if I recall correctly, it was a $70,000 advance. And then when we sell it, the sales go against the advance. Then everything after that, you get whatever it was, 6% or whatever of the royalties. We broke out of that system, circumvented the hierarchy. And it was a new way of using our minds. And that's when we began to realize that the mind today doesn't work the way we were using our mind to go around the hierarchy. Well, we realized and gave that a name, neo-thinking. And that was Aristotelian thinking. We didn't know that at the time. But as I realized and I got into, left the bank, got completely into this business, my father's business, I&O Publishing Company. Well, it was a new way of using the mind that's never been used before. And I started writing down what the heck was going on in my mind. And I wrote the first manuscript, Neothink manuscript. Then I wrote the next one and the next one and the next one, as my father wrote the next Neotech and the next Neotech manuscript. And between the Neotech and the Neothink manuscripts, we have sold close to $400 million of Neotech and Neothink by circumventing the hierarchy. Now, had we not broken through to this new way of using the mind, we would have just said, well, no one wants to publish the book. And it would have just politely been shelved and accumulated dust over the decades. And we wouldn't have what we have now, this ability, this power to change the world for the better. That came from Aristotelian thinking, unbeknownst to us. So Neothink is Aristotelian thinking. Neothink circumvents the hierarchy. Circumventing the hierarchy is the only path to Eudaimonia. By using Neothink, that everything incredible happened thereafter. Now, I want to say one more thing about this story that is quite incredible. When we became very successful, suddenly, out of the blue, I'm getting contacted by not one, but two of the world's largest self-improvement empires, and they wanted to partner with me. And in looking at the sheer numbers and the metrics, we would have been over $1 billion company with either one of those two empires, us combining together. It would have been incredible. But here's back to this expression of eudaimonia. I think almost anyone would have taken those deals. I turned them both down. And there was a reason I could do that, first of all. And that's because there were no more survival pressures. I had broken out of that trap, the survival pressure trap that the hierarchy has nearly everyone on our planet trapped in, survival pressures. But I was beyond that now. So now my decision came from eudaimonia. You see, my dreams were to end suffering in the world at both an individual level, such as my Neothink manuscripts for people who are stuck in the hierarchical system to break out, and on the civilizational level, Neovia, curing chronic diseases, curing aging. So those are my dreams. Remember, eudaimonia is aligning with your essence, value creation, and with the dreams that you personally want to pursue. So the power to say no is the greatest power of all. And I said no to $2 billion enterprises, potential enterprises, by turning down the two largest self-improvement empires from partnerships. Yeah, I would have had a lot more money. Remember I said earlier that you don't measure this by riches, by wealth. You measure it by the whole human flourishing. So me and my flourishing is to cure suffering in the world. This is why now Wallace and I and my family, we're having these Day of Enlightenments and these Stargazer events, because we can help remove suffering on the individual level in those events. And that is also why I spend an enormous amount of time and money pursuing Neovia. Neovia, of course, is the US name for immortalis. So the power to say no, to align with your essence and your dreams, is the great power of Aristotelian thinking, which we bring back through neo-thinking. So eudaimonia for me, for my family, is bringing neo-think to you and neovia to the world. Thanks. It's great talking to you.